So many people want to leave their body. I'm constantly talking to clients and friends who are wanting to experience the outer by leaving their body. And I'm always like, you leave the body by staying in the body. I promise you, like, stay in your body and go in. Don't skip the root chakra all the way up and try to leave you're like, you want to solve your problems by going out. I promise you the answers are inside.
2, 1, 0.
Hello and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Today's conversation is with a friend of mine. Her name is Kristin Van Wey, and she's one of the most extraordinary human beings that I know. She is the founding director of Let's and the CEO of Essentials First. She is the international leader, educator, speaker, and trainer in innovative approaches to well-being and has helped tens of thousands experience insight, understanding, and remarkable result. Her genius is in strategizing solutions for some of the world's most challenging problems, such as human trafficking, poverty, and abuse, as well as creating models for physical, emotional, and financial self-reliance. Kristin's most important sessions centers around her spiritual relationships with the divine and her family. She has been blessed with an incredible supportive husband, Shane, for 31 years, 7 children, and 5 grandchildren. Our conversation today was about current situation, what is going on in the world, how do we deal with fear and how do we react to fear. Kristin shared with me her very personal out of body experience, something she doesn't share with many people ever. And we dove into a lot of ways to become stronger, more empowered, and live your best life ever. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello there, Kristin Van Wey, and welcome to the show. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. It is so much fun reconnecting.
It's so much fun. So you've been a guest on the show before, and now you're back again, and you've been a really sweet part of my life. We're friends, and you're always there for me. You're like one of the sweetest people I know, and one of the most knowledgeable people I know. Whether it is healing the body or mindset or spirituality, you're very well rounded and very knowledgeable, and I just love hearing you speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I feel deeply in love with you as well, Orion, and I love our friendship. And I feel like it's just a mutual exchange of ideas and strategy and just heart when we get together. So it's always a pleasure to share time
Yes,
with you.
yes, yes, you're definitely a gem.
Thank
Would
you.
you like to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your passions?
That's a long
I
conversation.
know, I know you have so many things, but maybe just a little bit.
Just a little. Well, I'm like the rest of you, just going through life and trying to figure it out every day and collecting tools as I go along to help me with the journey. Each of us have such different roles and responsibilities as we go through Earth, and so I just find a lot of joy in learning about how to connect people and myself on this journey, how to connect into that part of ourselves that is going to guide us to have fulfillment in our purpose. So why are we here? Why this time? Why right now? So who am I and why am I here has been a question that I've been pursuing most of my life. I've had, like the rest of you, I have spiritual gifts that I've been developing for many, many years, and that's turned into also what I do for a living, and that is to help guide people into those shadows of their life, guide people into the places that are most uncomfortable. And really, what I try to do is develop my light to be bright and to be pure and to be authentic. And then I attract the people who are part of my tribe who I get to partner with in creating legacy in their own lives. But as they come toward my light, I lead them into their darkness. And that may sound a little odd, but that's really where the magic is, and that those portals of darkness that lead us into our truth, the things that we've been conditioned in and things that have led us away from who we are. I like to bring people in. I'm not afraid to go to the depths with people. And so I've started out as a massage therapist many, many years ago, 33 years ago, probably. I think somewhere around that neighborhood. And I started bumping into energy fields. And so traditional Chinese medicine became part of my career and my studies for many years. I study the laws of health and nutrition and just what does the human body need in order to thrive. And then I started bumping into belief systems and the mind. And so I spent the last 20 years focused on energy psychology and understanding the laws of creation. And I became an essential oil expert because I found that essential oils were this bridge between a mind, the body, and the spirit. And it's like a language that speaks all of them. So I became a master at integrating those into my work. And along the way, I founded a nonprofit and became very aware of the need to end human trafficking. So we have an entire program for preventing human trafficking through education, and we take a very unique approach by teaching men and women and youth starting at 9 years old how to track, how to be okay in their body, how to understand their anatomy and physiology, but also healthy mind, body, spirit, environment, setting goals. And just, again, same thing I do in all of my other work. We created curriculums. We've been on the ground in Haiti I've been there for over 9 years now. And teaching the reproductive health so that children are conceived and born into families where they can be nurtured and taken care of, so that they can go to school and they have the best opportunity to live a life of fulfillment and joy like everybody has a desire to do. So that's really a background. And where I am right now in my career is very deeply involved in helping people find their design. I love gene keys and integral human design, where we can really look at a map of who we are in a very clear way based off of your unique DNA, based off of your time of birth and location, and have found it to be one of the most accurate of any tools that I've had. And that's where we find ourselves, is in this crazy time on our planet that we get to awaken to who we are so that we can all play the roles that we're here, because we need all of us. We need all of us showing up to our capacity right now.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the term black light?
Black light in what context?
In the context that black light is the light that contains all spectrums of light.
Yes.
Yes. What is it? Do you know anything about it?
Well, if we're talking about the same thing, black light to me would just be the most dense part of frequency, is where the most amount of light and truth is. And we shy away from those darker areas. That's a little bit what I was calling a shadow frequency earlier. It's like leading people into the black so that they can find the light, because they're connected. The yin and the yang connect together, and we need them both. There's value in the black and there's value in the light, if that's what you're referring to.
It is. It is. It's hard for our mind to conceive that there is a dichotomy within unity.
Oh, do we contemplate that often? Our whole lifetimes, we're in these human bodies trying to figure out these dichotomies, and you're right. But they're there, and it's called the delicious dilemma. We have these dilemmas where there are these things we think about in our mind, which, by the way, our minds are not there to solve problems or to do anything with other than storage capacity, right? That's another topic we could dive into. But we have our minds and we live in these bodies, and yet there's this whole universe around us. And as above, so below, as within, so without. And so we have to be willing to go into these dichotomies that you named, and be willing to be open to learn something new and to see something through a different set of eyes, or we will always continue to repeat the same patterns. We're always going to be in the same place if we don't surrender. Surrender is a really important word. Surrender is probably the key to presence and anything else we create. Surrendering to the black light.
Yeah. I used to not like this word, but the day I surrendered to my higher power, I got it. Major breakthrough.
Yeah, me too. Me
Tell
too.
me about it.
Oh boy. It's not, sometimes it's a one event that really cracks open the light. Really, it's an unwinding of our DNA. There's this awakening that comes as we unwind, as we have more and more access to our genius. And, sometimes it's a one-time event and it's really, really shocking to a system. And other times for other folks, it's a longer term experience where they gently and slowly move through these cycles of recognition of their shadow patterns and the things that they're going through. For me, it really goes back to a long pattern of 18 years old being exposed to parasites. And I had a
Uh-huh.
really bad case of waterborne parasites I was a youth counselor in a survival program out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm.
And I drank out of a stream and there was a dead deer upwards in the stream. And it took about 9 months to figure out that I had all these parasites. And so
Wow.
I didn't know what to do. I felt massive amounts of pain, even went in surgically to try to see if something was wrong, and eventually realized it was parasites. But I can draw a line in the sand from that moment forward in my life where I was thriving and had vital energy in a lot of ways, and then all of a sudden I just started to decline over the decades. And I have a large family. I have 7 children, and so after the birth of each of my children, my body didn't recover, but I longed for this large family, and I really saw I knew I had a large family, so I was going to have that family, but by the time I had my last child, I was already very, very ill. And so it was at that time that I discovered I had Lyme disease.
Wow.
And that was something, now it's a little more recognized, but gosh, 15 years ago or even 20 years ago, trying to diagnose that is almost impossible. So I went through a lot of years of a lot of doctors and a lot of programs and I named all the things that I was familiar with. So I had a lot of tools under my tool belt, but I was unable to work with myself. And so there's a lesson I might have shared with this before with you, but I found this guru in France. He was from Italy, but he was teaching a workshop in Nice. And one of my friends talked me into going because she was so sure that he had this miracle ability to transform instantly and manifest instantly healing in the body. And so I don't know how I got on that plane. My husband was not happy with me, but I was very stubborn, and I said, I'm going because I'm either going to die or I'm going to go. I've been in bed about a year and a half at that point.
My goodness. I can
So
imagine.
anyway, flying across the ocean, I had a near death experience. And
Wow.
that was the first time that I understood what the word surrender means. Because when
Whoa.
you get to the place where your mind and your brain and your intellect cannot do anything to solve a problem. Now, the Buddhists have a lot to say about this. Like, you have these questions that you can never answer, and as soon as you surrender that you can't answer it, then you get the solution. Well, that's kind of where I was too. And I was on that plane and I finally was like, I can't give up my children. Like, I can't let go. But I knew that if I let go, I wouldn't stay in my body. I just knew I wouldn't. And I finally got to the place where my whole body was shutting down, and I finally said, okay, thy will be done. And I just remember just having that near death experience, and I learned a lot of things in
What,
that
wait,
moment.
wait, wait, wait. What was it like?
What was the near death like?
Yeah.
Well, prior to the near death, it was terrifying, and I was in this state of trying to use my mind and techniques. I'm trying to energy test what I need. I was trying to speed dial on every tool I've ever learned my whole life. I'm sitting in whole brain. I'm calling on angels, like everything. And then the moment that I surrendered, it was the most peaceful slip, like just this slip. And oftentimes when you read about near death experiences, like, I think we all say the same thing, that there's this overwhelming sense of peace.
Mm.
It's a state of ecstatic energy. Like, there's nothing, well, there's one thing on the earth that can remind us of it. And well, there's 2 things. If you're in alignment during childbirth, you can feel it there and you can feel it orgasmically. But this energy is an intense space that surrounds every cell of your body, and without any question that you are magnificence, you are love, you are the pure essence of the divine. And for me, I didn't go into nothingness, although I was in nothingness. Like there's this, let's go back to dichotomy feelings again, but there's this space of being completely autonomous in my body and knowing that I am me, but that I was one with everything. And I did not go deeply into the next realm. There's this space in between that I tend to continually go anyway, but at the time of this, I knew where I was, and I knew that if I traveled to a certain distance, I played around in there a little bit, and I did have communication with a guide, but I knew if I went any further, I could see where I was. If I went any further, I would not come back. And the question was, Kristin, you've done great things with your life, and you have a choice. We know how much pain you've been in. We hear you. We feel you. And there's much to do should you choose to go back. But if you choose to go back, it's a journey. It's not going to be, oh, you have this epiphany and it's all fixed. You have to be willing and committed to get up every day and learn and be open and shifting generational patterns. Do you want that responsibility? Like, are you willing to say yes? And there was no question. I never even considered not going back. Well, for a moment, because I'll tell you what, that feeling of that peace is it's just
Very
this
alluring,
draw.
probably.
Yes, a very alluring is a good word. It was just, I was there for quite some time, but I knew that in coming back, I don't know, it changed me. Even though the veil was always thin for me and I could see and hear spirits even as a child and all of that, it opened up a space inside me that helped me understand the importance of being in my body, the importance of having a body, and how essential it is to our growth on the planet. Like, we came to this earth to have a body, and so many people want to leave their body. I'm constantly talking to clients and friends who are wanting to experience the outer by leaving their body, and I'm always like, you leave the body by staying in the body. I promise you, like, stay in your body and go in. Don't skip the root chakra all the way up and try to leave you're like, you want to solve your problems by going out. I promise you the answers are inside. And so there's like these little seeds. It was almost like it activated within my cells, my DNA, like this part of me that I've never questioned so much. And I have well, you know me, I have this great endurance regardless of what's happening around me to continue this. And so I ended up in the ICU. They met me with an ambulance, and I spent the next week in ICU in France. And what I learned in there is that guru came to see me in the hospital because
Wow.
I was
So
part
that
of a
happened
class
on the plane?
on the plane to France.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many hours
So
before you
this,
landed?
oh gosh, 3
My
probably,
goodness.
two or
I
two or
bet
three,
everybody
I'd
were
say.
freaking out.
Oh, the poor flight attendants. It was so sad. I was like, I would, before I got to the point of a near death and I was not in my body anymore, I was like almost trying to take care of them too. I was, really concerned because they cleared everybody to the back of the plane and I was laying across the seats and they were like trying to help me. It was a challenging experience, but I saw them rise, and I so grateful for the help that I had in times when, you know, I didn't have my family or the ability to go to the emergency room and have a doctor take care of me in times of critical care.
So the
But
girl
what
came
I
to
was
the
going to say,
hospital.
and this guru came to the hospital, and I realized that he didn't have any power.
Ho, ho,
I
ho.
was like, I came and I like, do your magic, right? You're here to teach us mesmerism. He was teaching mesmerism and these arts of being able to instantly manifest, the old ancient alchemy. And that speaks my language. I'm kind of an alchemist by nature. And so he left, and I remember feeling so crushed. I remember just feeling like I thought that you know how many times I've learned this lesson, but this one was the most profound, and that's that crossroads for me. And that was like, be your own guru. It's
Mm.
like a program I should form, like, be your own guru. Every single thing you need to make it through Earth life is already inside you. And until you actually have an experience, those are just words. I've heard those words like self-care and love yourself and, be your own guru, whatever. But it's true, and it's hard to articulate with the amount of energy that will transform another person or inspire another person to go on that search, go on that journey. And I also know that you don't have to have a near-death experience in order to learn these things. There's a lot more gentle way to do this. A lot more gentle way.
I don't know. It just seems like everybody that had a real breakthrough had this, like mic drop moment. It's like, boom, something
I
really strong happened, and then they shifted. Like, I don't know many people that kind of like cruise through life, and all of a sudden, after a few years, they discover, it's. I. j- Do you know anybody like that?
No, I really don't. I don't think they need to have a near death and you're almost like,
Yeah, yeah, but there was
having
always
the
something.
ultimate, but there is. Now I come from a Christian background. And so in the Christian theology and tradition, you have an atonement of Christ, you have this period in between, and then you have a crucifixion, and then you have a resurrection.
Hmm.
And I've thought a lot about Christ and the master teaching that he gave, and I was thinking how there's these patterns with every master teacher that's been on the planet, and really there's different themes given by them, but the thing that I learned from the Christ is that all of us will have a dark night of the soul. We will all have a
Okay.
Gethsemane. There's something within us. What he did, in my opinion, is a portal. He opened up a space that's eternal that we can access at any point. This example, and I've thought long and hard about my own shadow of death and bleeding from every pore. What does that even mean to me, right? And it's interesting, when I was in France, I literally bled water from every cell of my body. My
Wow.
cells weren't working. I had something similar to diabetes insipidus, where the mechanism in my brain wasn't telling my cells to release water. So I was drinking like I was so thirsty, but then my sodium potassium levels got off, so the sodium wasn't letting the water release.
Oof.
So by the time I got to the hospital, what was happening is my cells were popping. So
Mm.
they were very, very concerned that I'd have brain damage or die because of the amount of cells that were bursting open. And so as I've thought back on my journey, and this is just my personal experience, we can all, whatever tradition we come from, we can find these stories and examples. But for me, I was like, literally my cells gave me this experience and understanding the deepest grief and pain that I personally could go through as a human being. Like, what can we handle before it's too much?
Right.
And so that experience of the atonement, of we have our own Gethsemanes, and then this, what will we do? What was Christ willing to do before he was even crucified for this? And
Mm.
then there was this moment on the cross. And by the way, I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, because it's a really sacred experience that I had, but it's just coming out of my mouth. So I apologize
No,
if it's
thank you for
too
sharing that. I am
kind of
honored.
sacred.
Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
it's really one of the first times I've shared it, because it's so much a part of what keeps me in alignment with my truth. But we have to all find that for ourselves, and this Christian tradition for me is very important. But put it in your own context if you're, as you're listening to this. But there was a point on the cross where he was like, Father, where art thou? And are there times in our own life where we feel utterly alone?
Mm.
Are there times where we must take full and fearless responsibility of the roles that we have? And in his case, he knew what his role and responsibility was, and he had the courage to do it, but that didn't mean he didn't feel all alone. And so then we have this beautiful unfolding of a resurrection, and this unifying of our mind and our body and our spirits. And so I believe that this space is eternal within each of us. And so while I want to say, I don't think it has to be as dramatic as my story,
Mm.
but there will be times where more the energy world would call the dark night of the soul,
Mhm.
and going through these experiences. And a lot of my life and my career, we have this judgment of, we want good, we want the light, Don't we, Orion? We don't want the darkness.
Oh
We don't
yeah, of
want the
course.
black night of the soul. Like we want to always feel happy and we want good. And I really learned the importance of honoring all of the emotions I have and all of the experiences I have. And yes, it's very, we could be flippant and say, we grow from those and we need those experiences. And
But
yet it
nobody
really is
likes it.
true. Nobody likes it. We
Of
want to
course.
put it in a little jar in a container and move it over here.
Oh yeah.
But I promise that there is a wisdom far beyond our own inside of you. Our cells are directly connected to our divine lineage. We can uncover all that junk DNA we thought we had is alive inside of us. We just don't know how to access it. And yet now we do. And we're moving into an era where we're being called. We're being called to rise up because yes, we've had war on the planet before, and there are countries who are continuously in war. There's always something
There
happening
is
somewhere.
always something. Yes.
Always. So we're not immune, but here, like in the States, we've had relative peace for several generations.
Yes.
And these moments are like waking all of us up to go, wait, whoa, wait a minute, what's happening in my world? And we are being faced with our greatest fears. And just like my own pain and my own struggles, because behind my near death experience, behind the pain of my Lyme disease, was a lot of years of denial of who I am. It's a lot
Mm.
of not stepping into my path. We each have a divine blueprint. We're born with a map, and we can find it in lots of places. We just need to know how to read the map. We have iridology in our eyes. We have our ears are a map of the body, our hands, fingerprint analysis. We have all kinds of reflexologies. We have meridians, and we have techniques. And when I found human design, it literally gave a map of the system. Our body graph shows us a map of where the energy was designed to flow, our spiritual gifts and talents, and what we came here to do. And our golden path through Gene Keys is genekey.com. Just anything Richard Rudd has ever written is gold.
Mm-hmm.
It's an artwork. It's so beautiful. And so I started looking at that, and now I have a language to say the further away that we get from our divine blueprint, our design, the more pain and dysfunction we're going to have.
Mm.
And we chose circumstances that bring us into the shadow so that we can find our way into the light, because there's an ownership and a mastery that comes when we're willing to have our eyes open in the dark
I
and to
think I've
go in there
been
and to
I,
face
I
it.
think I've been like, talked about resurrection, or I never used that word before, but maybe reinventing myself, or um, going through so many dark nights of the soul, and so many, like, I feel like my life were very rich, and I can write many many books about many many chapters, and every time I went through the dark night of the soul and I came out strong on the other side. I became a different, more elevated version of myself, and a stronger version of myself. And yet, there is a lot of fear. Like you mentioned, what's going on in the world today. There is a lot of fear. There is a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes I feel like, seriously, like I live in the Truman Show. It's like, we've been in the news broadcasting COVID for 2 years, and then one day, oh, look, there is a war, and where's Dr. Fauci? He disappeared. So I just feel like there is like this manipulation from above, like kind of like leading us to wherever they want us to focus on. And a lot of people that it's whether you were in the mainstream media, that was very, very scary, or going on Telegram and following some back channels. That was very scary because you saw the hypocrisy and the corruption.
Yeah.
So everybody, I feel, in the last 2 years were exposed to so much fear and inflicted trauma. It was traumatic. It still is. Like, just wearing masks and seeing everybody with masks on. It's pretty dramatic, and all the division between the injected and the non-injected, pretty dramatic. And don't and there is this like deadly thing that is going to kill you, and everybody's gonna drop dead in the street. I mean, there was so much fear. And when we spoke before this call, you told me that you were not that affected by it. Can you tell me a little bit about it, and what was your strategy to deal with it, and what do you even think about what is going on? I know it's so many questions at once.
Yeah, it is. It's a big topic, and I think there are a lot of levels to the conversation. For me personally, um, there's a lot of illusions on the planet, and I have I don't know if it's a gift or whatever, but I can see through the illusion.
Mm-hmm.
So from day one of this entire situation, I was like, no, this is an illusion. It to me, I'm not saying that people don't get sick, and I'm not saying that COVID wasn't real or a virus, but what I am saying is that there was most definitely a plan in place
Oh,
to
definitely.
follow
So
that. You
obviously.
can't, yeah, the obvious was the obvious from day one. And so for me, I didn't put any energy into any of the fear. I didn't feed into the fear. It felt like you were saying the Truman Show. I was like, okay, well, what are we going to get today? And I I could spend time, and I do keep up. My husband actually keeps up more on political and those types of things more than I do, because it's very difficult to me to listen unless I'm just being, oh, I'm just going to be open to hearing what the narrative is right now. But for me personally, I've worked for a very long time of understanding who I am, and I'm not affected by a very low vibration narrative.
Hmm.
I know what the truth is, and I know the power that I have to create. So I'm very mindful of the way that I think and the way that where I give my energy to. And what I've had to watch myself is to shift into like getting frustrated with the leadership or getting angry.
Yeah,
So I've
very
had to pull
frustrating.
myself back. Yeah, because you go, we can do better than this. But
Yeah.
what I, we can handle this. Can I run the country for a minute? No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, it takes a lot of brilliant minds to run countries and do and things like that. And there's a lot of different viewpoints. And so,
It looks like
not
there's somebody is running the country, but it's not the people that we see in charge.
Yeah, that would be my opinion as well. And I do think that there's reasons for it. But again, we need the yin and the yang, and I realize that.
Hmm.
We need the light, we need the dark. We have this interplay, and so where the benefit of the dark and the benefit of the fear is, it's necessary because so many of us have been so complacent that we're having a near death experience right now as as a culture. So
Oh,
it is
wow.
dramatic,
That's a
right?
really powerful way to look at it.
We're having a near death experience in it, and it may feel like it's going to take our life. And that's where we have to know who we are. We have to be able to dig in deeper and heal our relationships and heal our core wounds. Richard Rudd has this program called the Golden Path, and it has three different pieces to it. But in the Venus sequence, it's all about healing the 7 core wounds that we have as humanity, and also as individuals, and very, very specific with gene keys that go and very specific themes within each of these areas. But it's caused me to realize that we all are here to work through these core wounds, and we have a responsibility collectively to do that. And right now, as we go through this dark night of the soul on the planet, it's necessary.
Hmm.
So I'm not angry that we're going through it. I'm not like having my fingers scraping against the wall, trying to hold on to the old, because I want to move into the new. And I know in order to do that, that the old must burn to ashes, like to a degree. There's going to be enough that we can rebuild. But I know that unless we all shift simultaneously, that there's going to be some clunkiness. And if you look back historically, anytime moving into a new epoch, like if we go from the industrial era, right, we move out of new eras into a technology era, we're right at the precipice of moving into a new era. And so can you imagine those people with horse and buggies, and they were like, no, we can't have these automobiles, and all of a sudden that whole industry went out of business, but a whole new industry came, and then we have flight. How
Hmm.
are people flying across the world? And now we have television and phones, and now we have cell phones and technology and all these things. So in order for us to get to the new era, I look at this as such a positive thing. Every day I wake up and I go, I cannot believe that I get to be alive at a time in history where this is unfolding. Like,
What do
I
you
was
think is
born for
unfolding?
this.
What is the new era?
Well, I feel like it's already been outlined. Like, look at the sci-fi movies. There's nothing that's brand new under the sun. Everything has been created. We're just redistributing where energy goes, but our imagination tells us what's possible. Gosh, since the 90s, I've been saying internet, the www, all of this technology is the training wheels of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's teaching us what's possible. Phone calls with a cord hanging out of the wall was all we thought, and it was really cool until we had, remember our cell phones that were like 12 inches tall, and we carried around a box so we could talk on a phone car. Maybe you don't. I remember those days, early on cell phones before, like,
Oh no,
and then all of a sudden,
I remember those days.
you remember the big one? Okay. Yeah. So then, now we're like wearing it on our watch, and we're having chips put in our bodies to track things. Like, it's not inconceivable to believe that those were the training wheels, that we have the ability to live far beyond where we're living, but we must shed the shadows. We must face our greatest fears in
Yeah.
order to have access to the gifts.
Yeah.
So we're all worried about, we spend 90% of our time focused on the shadow when it needs to be 90% is focused on the gift and what's called the siddhi, siddhi, the quintessential part of who we are, the ultimate potential that we have as human beings. And so 90% goes into the gift and the essence, and 10% goes into recognizing the patterns that we have of these core wounds.
You
And having a
mentioned,
map
yeah, you mentioned, I just want to, to clarify, you mentioned human design and you mentioned the gene keys. What are they? Can you just give me like a short introduction to what it is?
Yes, of course. So in the early 90s, late 89, 90s, Ra Uru Hu was a man who downloaded or transmitted an entire system based off of 5 different ancient systems, like just knowledge banks. So things like the I Ching, which was the foundation of traditional Chinese medicine, the yin and the yang theory, and they had these 64 hexagrams with information and just portals of experience within these 64. And those grew into yin and yang and then the 5 element theory. So that was one thing that Ra took into this human design system. The other one was looking at astrology, looking at the chakra system and traditional energy systems. So we have like, they don't call them chakras, they call them centers, but they have that. And really looking at quantum science, quantum physics, and how the DNA works. So really bringing in some of the modern sciences. But as you pull these different technologies, and the Kabbalah. So all of these ancient texts and religious and spiritual and also science was pulled together in one system. So he uses this, your natal birth chart, your time, date, and place with the exact position of our planets. And by the way, I don't have a background in astrology. I'm kind of having a lesson as I've gone along learning my human design, but in understanding the neutrinos, and neutrinos are what stars breathe. It's the off-gassing of stars, and as they are in the atmosphere all around us, they're imprinted with information from what it passes through. So what they say in the system is that it passes through the solar system, it's passing through our system, and wherever the planets were is encoded, and it matches exactly into our DNA. And so he came up with this whole system, and it sounds a little wacky, like, wow, how is that even possible? The first time I saw my human design and I saw what it said about me, I felt seen for the first time in my life. It was not revelatory, but it was validating, and it gave me a very interesting look, because I come at it from a energy medicine background. It gave me some ideas on how to work with health and where the shadows are showing up in our system, in our bodies. So then, one of his students, early on students, was Richard Rudd, and he worked with the human design system for 20 years. And he began to expand on that, and he began to receive his own really divinely inspired information, and that became the Golden Path. So they're two completely different systems, but one Gene Keys built off of human design. And human design tends to be a very rigid system in what Ra downloaded. And I've really appreciated some of the teachers who've come out of that, who've expanded it even more. So I really like integral human design. But at any rate, the human design body graph gives us a lot of information. And so it's the most clear map that I've seen. Outside of fingerprints are pretty cool too. I do fingerprint analysis, but the human design really encompasses why we're here. And the golden path that Richard put together is like the tree of life in the Kabbalah. And you can follow, and it shows you your life work and evolution and your health through your radiance and your life purpose. And then it brings you up through this Venus sequence of how we closed off our hearts as children from conception to 21 years old. And we go through and unravel the onion. And then it brings us into our core wounds and then takes us through a prosperity sequence. And it's just, you can enter it anywhere you want, but it gives a lot of really clear information. But ultimately, it's not about a system anymore. We're bypassing systems at this point, and it's really about thinking of these as your DNA as living library, and your spiritual gifts and how you approach that and how you spend and use your energy. And I think it's done a really good job. But even Richard Rudd will say this is not a system. This is just it's an access point for you to discover what's inside yourself.
What's in your human design that makes you run to Haiti when there's a disaster and everybody's trying to get away, but you run into the disaster zone trying to help as much as you can? Like, what's in you that is that have this incredible courage and compassion toward other people?
It's actually really clearly in my design. When I get off my design, I feel the pain just like everybody else, and so it pulls me back on track. But I'm here to innovate new systems and new structures that bring us into this new way of living. We're leaving the top down model, we're leaving this Pisces era where it's, competition, and I have to make sure that I'm taken care of, to this place where it's a we. We're moving from the I and my life purpose to the expanded life purpose of what we're here to do and create together. And in my chart, I have some very specific channels of energy that say, I'm here to create systems within the community. I have a very strong line of loyalty to the community, and that all of the resources and things that I create goes towards bettering the community, taking care of and nurturing the community. And the gifts that I've been able to step into is being able to use my passion, my energy, and my voice and my intuition to bring awareness to this. And so it does get, I don't know. I think I have this, my kids joke because I have the sacred circle like we talk about all the time. I'm like, oh, I'll put a sacred circle around you. But it's really about each of us putting our own sacred circle. And when we are in tune with what human design calls your strategy and authority, when you're in tune with the way that your system speaks to you, the divine wisdom of God or your system, when you know how to listen to that, you know how to recognize it first of all and know what it sounds like and how it feels in your body. If that's the only thing we teach our children, or if it's the only thing we learn, then everyone will start making decisions in alignment with what's going to be flow for them. And so for me, when I go to Haiti, especially when I've been to Haiti when it's pretty, most people are like, don't go, what are you going for? It's not safe. And I'm
I
like,
know I told you that last time.
I'm in alignment. I know. I went in
I'm like,
October and it was a little messy. It was a little messy, but I always feel safe, and I always have such a clear vision that I don't ever question it. I just go and I do. And it just seems to work for me.
yeah. I can speak with you for hours, as you well know, and I would love to have you back for another wonderful conversation. But before
Sure.
we
I love
say
it.
goodbye for now, two questions. One, What are your three top tips to living a stellar life? And second one is where can people find you and work with you and get coaching with you and learn everything you have to offer?
Um, top three tips. If you could learn to listen to your inner wisdom, be so crystal clear on how your divine essence, how your higher self, how God speaks to you, that would be my number one. Because once you have that connection and you have the confidence in it and you practice it and you're willing to listen, and I can give you tips on that because we can get really clear on how your system talks to you. But once you get that, then everything else is just a decision at a time. You can be in tune with that. So that would be my first one, is to be in tune with yourself, and to honor the journey would be my second one, to living a stellar life, to be willing to surrender to whatever it is you're experiencing and to honor it enough to allow yourself to feel it and to be it and to find the nuggets of truth and genius within every experience. Be willing to go into the messy. The magic is in the messy. Be willing to go into that. And the third one would be to give the same grace to the people that you love and live with first, because those are the ones that we have the hardest time with usually. But and give that same grace and that love and curiosity. Like when people act a certain way, there's a reason for it, and be curious about that, and have compassion. So those would be my three.
Beautiful. And where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook on Kristin Van Wey. You just look up Kristin Van Wey and you'll find me on both of those places. And if you want to go to my website, it's just kristinvanwey.com. And my love that I'm building up right now, LETS is my nonprofit, and you can find it at letsempower.org. We are at a crossroads right now. We are growing so amazingly well and getting so many results that we are just, the seeds are sprouting, and we are calling in our tribe. We are calling in people who want to partner with us in this work to not only end human trafficking, poverty, and abuse, but people who would like to be a part of just moving that forward through the funding aspects. We need large donors so this can go even more global. So you can find us there, and I would love to partner. I wear a lot of hats. So I have my coaching hat, I have my doTERRA hat where we teach people about their body, mind, and self-reliance in a lot of ways there. So there's a lot of partnership there. But my personal branding, where I really like walking people their through the darkness to create the legacy, and teaching the laws of creation, and how to step into your most stellar life. You can find me on any of those spaces. Just reach out and I can let you know pricing. I really prefer to work with people who are wanting to create legacy, who aren't afraid anymore to go in to leave. How about not afraid to leave the bandwidth of fear? How about that? I want to work with people 6 months to a year, ideally, but I will do, I'll do one-off appointments too if needed.
Got it. And I highly recommend anyone to just have a conversation with you because you are amazing.
Thank you. Well, I love you, and I appreciate your show and all the great things you're doing in the world with your voice and your heart.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember to listen to your inner wisdom, honor the journey, give the same grace to the people you love, and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.